So I've had this video idea in mind for a really long time, and I hope that from what you hear, I've done the topic some justice. Alright everyone, I think we need to have a discussion. Someone's probably gonna hate me after this. Greetings everyone, you all know the deal. Morning, afternoon, evening, and night, depending on where you are when you're watching this. Welcome to yet another insightful video, hopefully, on this channel. Today I did this. And of course today I'm back with more commentary, of course. And this time I would like to shift the conversation to speaking on women. And no, I do not mean for this to come off as one of these like alpha male podcasts regurgitating some of these backward misogynistic think points that end up becoming like an echo chamber for dudes with issues, because they gotta go seek some help for real. No, for this video, I wanted to discuss the points of respecting, protecting, listening to, and believing women, because some of these topics are things that I sometimes kind of feel as though aren't thought of or talked about often or critically, or these points may even be dismissed when brought up in general conversation. Now trust me, there is a lot that we could go over in this, ranging from the internalized misogyny that the society tries to engrave in girls from a young age, to the sexualization and respectability politics that adults try to enforce during their pubescent age, to just the dismissive responses that women receive when speaking up about assault or harassment, to even speaking on concepts like the missing stare or the male gaze and the pink tax. And honestly, after digging into some of these topics deeper, I gotta say, a lot of women be going through it. Some of these problems become even more complex as you break them down by race or religion or age, or just garner entirely new issues altogether. We can talk about the struggle love concept that the black community emphasizes on black women, or the fetishization of Eastern Asian women, or the narrow-minded boxes that society places Latina women in, and so much more. And I think another matter that fits very well into this conversation pertains more so to men and how we also treat and talk about women as well. Many times men can be seen as the perpetuators of the stereotypes and hardships that women may have to go through in navigating a patriarchal world, and that discussion needs to take place, along with ceasing the negative narratives that are spewed. I think that it's especially important to have these conversations because sometimes I feel like either people don't give much thought to these talking points at all and just kind of string along with what everyone else is saying, or they spew these negative viewpoints and then they don't really think about why they go along with believing or perpetuating them, almost just like group thinking, which I feel like children are especially more susceptible to, and that's where some of these thoughts are first implemented. And so, with all this being said, to start, I'd first like to speak on. So, when it comes to the matter of respectability politics, it seems that a lot of people use this to kind of like dictate and validate their interactions with women. First though, allow me to at least supply you with a definition. Respectability politics, at least as defined by dictionary.com, is a set of beliefs holding that conformity to prescribed mainstream standards of appearance and behavior will protect a person who is part of a marginalized group from prejudices and systemic injustices. As for double standards, these are the application of different sets of principles for situations that are, in principle, the same. So while examples of respectability politics can be seen especially within the Black American community, often policing both the ways that they choose to present themselves and in the ways they speak, I do think that people play the game of respectability politics and double standards to discriminate against women in general as well. The philosophy behind these respectability politics, though, is namely that of if we do or act in the way that the majority group wants us to, then they'll treat us better. Sometimes adhering to respectability politics, though, can even be seen as a way for those marginalized to survive and advance in society due to the already complex hurdles that have been put in place for them. The matter of double standards upheld to women reach much further than just this, though. Gender double standards can range from body image and body standard debates to women taking charge being seen as too bossy, to them also being seen as too emotional, or to just hasty generalizations being applied. See, for example, phrases like, "Why are all women so emotional?" or "Why do women always love to gossip so much?" to dressing appropriately. An example of that, though, might be when women who are curvier or have a larger bust are not allowed the same leisures of wearing similar clothing that women who are slimmer would wear. Or just women in general being policed about wearing certain clothing because it's too revealing or it would set boys or men off. A common rhetoric that's usually found in the education sector. To even how certain tasks or household chores are divided up by gender. Usually women are more often than not expected to be the ones to handle most, if not all, house chores, and many times it's frowned upon if they aren't the ones handling such tasks. I think this also sometimes leads to men kind of equipping themselves with weaponized ignorance when asked to do some of the most basic requests around the home. I think you get the point. Double standards are essentially like this huge box of binding stereotypes and problems that society never fails to remind us of, regardless of how nuanced they may appear. Though we need to start removing people from these frameworks of thinking that can strip women of respect and the thought that they aren't anything more than the standard that society has historically set for them. Women aren't always given the luxury of expressing their sexuality in a way that men are. And just one of the ways in which this is highlighted in our society today is usually when men are allowed to typically boast about their sexual endeavors and usually are aligned with being cool or a player. Whereas when women share their sexual encounters or experiences, they're sometimes given names like slut or whore or other backhanded names. And I think this mindset also contributes to the narrative of boys will be boys, usually encouraging boys from a young age that they can or should sleep with as many girls as they wish as a way of making them seem cool or grown, because that's just what guys do. But on the flip side, there's this obsession of trying to keep girls pure, an expression that usually begins being enforced from a young age, usually accompanied with providing rhetoric that aligns with slut shaming if she acts otherwise. Even when it comes to some parents, an older-minded thought process usually went something along the lines of hoping that their son is sleeping around, or at the very least, they provide the comment, "God forbid he's gay." I will say that the homophobia expressed through nuance by cishet men and people who ascribe to certain religions is a whole other topic in itself. While as the hope for daughters is usually that they don't end up being a slut who ends up sleeping around with guys, or in today's day and age, a thought who ends up making an OnlyFans or getting into the industry of porn. This can also go back to the issue of gender double standards as well. Though in today's day and age, I do kind of feel more like women spin this narrative to say who cares what anyone really thinks, and kind of states to express your sexuality regardless of how anyone labels you. These labels can often be, though, the basis for how people decide to treat women, clinging to the notion that she's too easy to get with, or she has no standards, or she doesn't value herself, which I personally don't think is fine to say about anyone. What you decide to do with your body and how you choose to express or even not express your sexuality is no one's business but your own, and you owe no one an explanation of it. Any and everyone should be comfortable with understanding this, and I believe that encouraging more sex-positive rhetoric is a start. The narratives previously stated can also be seen as leading to victim blaming, though, especially when women come out with reports of sexual abuse or assault. We often hear phrases like, "Well, with the way you act, you were probably asking for it." This matter of sexuality is also extended and exemplified when men interact with women who are in the field of sex work, where they are commonly viewed as an item or a commodity or a means to an end, rather than just being respected as a person who's working just to make a living. This also can particularly be seen with men's strange requests for sex workers to create certain scenes that are very taboo and fetishizing in nature for them, or in porn directed by men for men, where women are seen as commodities or an object solely for a man's pleasure. There's a huge problem of more specifically cisgendered heterosexual men feeling entitled to women's bodies when it comes to the field of sex work, and quite often you can see that plenty of these clients end up trying to blur the lines between what is work and what could essentially escalate as something more due to the sense of entitlement. Even outside of the context of sex work, the entitlement that some men feel to women and their bodies are part of what causes the violence that can ensue when not given this, which has been seen to lead to conflict contributing to various levels of violence, especially rape culture. Women in general, though, usually looking to have any sort of sexual encounters with men, oftentimes have to consider and navigate things differently. Like, if this man is even someone who is trustworthy or safe enough to consent their interactions with. Because he could be a potential abuser, abductor, a person who posts your sexual encounters online without your consent, which see revenge porn, or anything. And so navigating the world of sexual exploration with someone as a woman can be especially challenging and daunting for these issues and more. Which almost makes it seem really ironic when a lot of guys say that women kind of have it easier when it comes to finding people to have sex with. And even if you do happen to find a guy, you have no idea what danger he poses to you, which might not be thought about as often from the male perspective. Also, pertaining to my earlier points regarding sex work and pornography, I think there could be an entire conversation on porn use and how its consumption by a generation of men has affected their mental construction of sexual encounters. But that's a video for another time, so moving on. Also, quick disclaimer, I'm not saying that porn is the end-all be-all source of all of your sexual frustrations and issues, but I believe it should at least be analyzed some of the effects that it has on the human mind, whether consumed in moderation or not. People also play the game of respectability politics and double standards when it comes to sexuality and trying to place an emphasis on keeping your virginity for someone, especially on young girls. The idea that a man wants a freak in the sheets and a woman who's also a pure saint at the same time also kind of comes to mind for this. There's always like that rhetoric that exists about how women who are virgins are better to sleep with versus someone who's already had sex before. And this is a huge issue in many cultures and countries. Also, can we just somehow entertain the idea that virginity is a social construct that's used to oppress female sexuality? No? Another time? Alright, fine. More historically, when women have been spoken about and placed in the center of sexuality, it's more often than not been used to quench the thirst that is the male gaze. Music videos, lyrics, male beauty commercials, pornography, and more are just prime examples of this, which fuels the thought that women are only acceptable to express their sexuality when it's for the acceptance of a man. And the issues of the male gaze can also lead to its internalization by women, where they may start to live life assuming that these actions, such as catcalling or blatant and repeated objectification and more, are acceptable, and it's the only way to know if they are deemed attractive or not. I also think that the male gaze is one of the reasons why many men can get so fixated on the idea that women dress up, wear makeup, and look good purely for the intent of male attention. Because I've constantly seen situations online where men will go and post comments on a woman's feed, usually stating something along the lines of, she really does not need all of that makeup, she's doing too much, or I think she looked better if she went natural. And well, that's great that you have an opinion, Bob, but in this case, it's unwarranted and unnecessary and nobody cares. Also, do tell, Robert, what exactly does natural mean? What does that look like? Because chances are what you think is a no makeup look actually has fooled you, as it is in fact a light foundation that has been placed on this person's face, but you couldn't tell because your uncultured eyes could not pick up on it. And so these are all but just a few of the issues noted regarding the discrimination that women may face when it comes to expressing sexuality. And on to the next point. So lack of representation is something that plagues people of various intersectionalities, and women are no exception. From movies to commercials to music videos to literature to cartoons to even stock images, The way that women are represented is something that might be overlooked by some. Some media appears to view women from a very narrow lens. You might be asking what I kind of mean by that. Well, consider this. When it comes to some of these previously mentioned pieces of media, oftentimes there is a very particular kind of woman that usually is represented. She typically is white, has a very slim build, is able-bodied, might wear like your average casual clothing, etc. Now, we all know that there are women of all different shapes, sizes, backgrounds, and beliefs, but it doesn't always feel like everyone's being represented in various forms of media like that's the case. And this lack of representation can be a factor in contributing to what people see as an acceptable form of what a woman should look like. When these images are portrayed often, it can have an effect on your mind and make you question why you don't see other people who look like you, almost wondering as if there's something wrong with or bad about yourself. Or it can also, for example, just make for a really hard time shopping online, seeing clothing that looks nice but is only ever worn by a specific body type in the previews. See also vanity shopping. This situation can also just altogether be seen working hand in hand with the Eurocentric beauty standard that also perpetuates the acceptable form of a woman. People even use this basis of beauty to also even dictate if a woman garners their attention or respect. I have a theory that this also plays into forming who young boys and men find attractive, as they aren't presented with an accurate spectrum of how women physically appear and thus lock in only on the types of women that they are shown in the media. Yes, of course, as soon as you go into the real world, you see all kinds of women, but I still think that the media plays a strong role in molding what is beautiful to men. And representation does not have to be construed purely, though, to these forms of media. Another really important way that women may suffer from a lack of representation is through various occupations. This is something that's especially problematic in historically male-dominated occupations, for example, like engineering, aeronautics, or even various trades. So this lack of representation can see trouble for women hoping to join these fields, as issues may arise where their voices aren't being heard or represented in meetings, or suggestions, or new product implementation. Or they can just be met with really abrasive, dismissive, or sexist comments, and even acts of harassment or other forms of discrimination. And so when breaking down representation by race and looking into the lens of Black women, for example, there's this great movement and notion of Black girl magic or aspiring Black femininity, which I'm personally not saying that there's anything wrong with the people who place those labels on themselves, but those are also sometimes examples of labels that don't usually represent or keep out other Black women. In one way that it's interpreted, the term Black girl magic is sometimes seen as the Black girl or woman who goes through strides and hurdles in life to achieve this almost unseemingly unachievable standard, but it can also leave out the other Black girls or women who don't ascribe to that notion or standard. Some really just don't care to go through that kind of life, and that's perfectly fine. There's also the newer Black femininity and Black women in luxury movements, which can also be interpreted as an ideology that only expresses femininity as a singularity, rather than a spectrum that includes all sorts of Black women with various forms of expression. Black women who don't aspire to this wave of Black femininity can be othered by the common tropes placed out by those who do conform to expression. Again, these are also just points that could have an entire video dedicated to themselves, but yeah. Now, there is some real irony in the issues that society perpetuates for women when it comes to the law. This can be seen from the topics of like abortion to discussion of the pink tax. Does anyone find it like really strange that lots of people, specifically speaking more so about America here, rally against the idea of like women having the autonomy to choose what they do with their bodies and are not given much help afterwards? Say, for example, a law is constructed in a way that makes it illegal for a woman to abort a child. Maybe this woman felt like she didn't have the funds to raise the child, or she was having sex with a guy and he induced some form of stealthing during the interaction, a known form of date rape. Or perhaps she wanted to abort the child, but she was still pressured into going through with the pregnancy due to family or religion or what have you. I mean, in any case, women can have any reason that they would feel it's best and necessary to abort a child. But anyways, the law goes into place and you have the child. Well, they're here now, so surely the government and the people who pressured you will want to do as much as they can to ensure that you can probably raise them, right? Whoa, hold the phone there, Buster. This is the United States we live in. Good old red, white, and blue. We do things differently here. If you care to know how we stack up compared to the rest, especially when it comes to things like paid leave for having a child, the country of Estonia grants parents 86 weeks of government mandated paid leave, currently the most of any country, and that includes maternal, paternal, and parental leave, while the US grants newly formed parents a grand, stunning total of haha, trick question, it's 0. So after looking into it, the US is still the only high-income developed country that does not grant federal mandatory paid maternal leave. Important to note, though, is that the states of California, New Jersey, New York, and Rhode Island, along with the District of Columbia, I think maybe a few other states, do have state mandated paid leave plans in place. But the point is that even the people who create laws around the autonomy that women own in regards to their body don't even always provide the most support when it's needed. And then people want to go along and talk trash about single mother parenting, but don't even bat an eye at the men who place them in those situations. Another issue with the law that commonly is cited as very problematic is how it taxes women on items, or just certain items. The pink tax is more specifically known as the tendency for products marketed specifically towards women to be more expensive than those marketed towards men. This phenomenon is often attributed to gender-based price discrimination, and so from cosmetics to hygienics to clothing to even other healthcare items, the discrepancy between the cost of products tailored for both men and women is alive and alarming. It's also extremely ironic that while women are stated to be placed at a disadvantage economically in terms of wages, that this higher tax on similar goods only further contributes to monetary issues that women would have to deal with. Pair that with the fact that there are certain hygiene products that men need not worry about purchasing due to anatomical differences, and the disparity only gets higher. And there exists some certain societal pressures that are placed on women to uphold specific standards, whether it's in terms of beauty or reproduction, specifically referring to the pressure placed on women to be the ones to use various forms of birth control as opposed to placing a higher emphasis on men. And these also cause further burdens. Some of the biggest complaints regarding the pink tax especially are also seen when it comes to how they affect healthcare and tampons or pads or menstrual cups or other items. Ultimately, when it comes to all of these issues, I think we could all agree that men should just not be making laws about women's bodies. I mean, the same people who make these laws, along with laws surrounding subjects like technology, science, and more, might not even have a decent understanding of how these all work, which to me makes these said laws quite flawed. Now, speaking more especially to the guys for this particular point, and I think this is a very important one to understand, the security of women is a very hot topic that needs to be addressed in our manosphere. Whether it's in settings like a gas station or a grocery store or the gym or bars or other social settings, or even generally during the night, there are countless times where men fail to provide a safe haven for women to exist and express themselves freely and comfortably, and that in itself is an issue. Numerous altercations rear themselves due to the abrasive nature of some men and their attitudes and advances towards women. I mean, it literally can end up being a death sentence for a girl or a woman to reject a man's constant advances on them just because they continually stood their ground and simply said no whether it's to the man who asks her for a number, or the guy who tries hard to ask her out, or the dude who tries to pressure her into his sexual advances. And it's things like this that further contribute to high rates of femicide, stalking, verbal and physical harassment and abuse, depression, anxiety, suicide, and a lot more. And varying forms of discrimination can also amplify these issues of abuse when considering factors such as racism that Black, Asian, Latina, and other races of women have to deal with, or the rampant transphobia that trans women also have to endure. I also think that this really highlights one of the effects of having male privilege, where a lot of guys just don't think twice, or even 3 times, about how they approach women and if it's the most appropriate way to do so, and if it even makes the recipient feel comfortable. Like, if the situations were reversed, I kind of doubt that plenty of men are fearing for their lives when interacting with women in many settings, or if just saying no to any of their advances. Another side of this conversation is looking at how women are advised to go about defending themselves in these cases, oftentimes told to keep firearms or other weapons on their person in case of extreme situations. Of course, though, while it is good to have ways to defend yourself, I think that there are some people who may not consider the amount of mental fortitude that it takes to have to keep and use such weapons, and what it can really do to your psyche just to have to go to such lengths. Even when women do end up defending themselves against harassers and abusers, all too often, we do hear stories where they still ended up facing legal repercussions just for the fact. Take, for example, the case of Cynthia Brown, a woman who was convicted of aggravated robbery and first-degree murder and sentenced to serve a life sentence at the age of 16 after killing Johnny Mitchell Allen, who at the time was stated to solicit her for sex. Now a free person though, she did release a documentary detailing her life and how she was forced into prostitution at a young age, along with being sex trafficked and raped repeatedly. And while getting caught into such a horrendous circumstance, Brown was still tried as an adult even after gaining the chance to fight against her abuser. And Brown's case is not the only one to end up this way. One thing that many people have noted and has honestly been quite bothersome is that when it comes to the discussion of female security, a great emphasis is more often than not placed on women to find ways to defend themselves in these grave circumstances. Although people tend not to focus on talking about how to prevent men from perpetuating these issues in the first place. Oftentimes, the focal point is that of protect our girls, when it seems like we don't hear enough of the narrative, educate your boys. We also have to start addressing the elephants in the room, or I guess more so the missing stare. Anyways, for those of you who don't know, the missing stare is a metaphor for a person within a social group who many people know is very untrustworthy or otherwise has to be managed, but whom the group chooses to kind of work around by trying to quietly warn other people of their behavior, rather than just deal with them and their behaviors openly. More specifically, the term was coined by blogger Cliff Pervocracy to describe an abuser or harasser who is tolerated in a community even though their misdeeds are well known. And some social groups may have and know this person, though like this definition states, they aren't really dealt with up front and accordingly, which can in turn lead to these problematic situations down the line. And so, also speaking on security, I'd also like to quickly bring up and dissect this topic for a second into a specific racial lens, and say that we need to stop promoting the narrative of saying that girls are fast as a way to justify the adultification of, especially or more specifically, Black girls. People are usually very quick to place this sexual and promiscuous narrative on Black girls as early as in adolescence, and it's something that heavily can alter how those around them see and interact with them. And the adultification of Black girls just as a whole does go beyond just sex, and it's something in which a lot of Black girls are usually seen as less innocent than, more specifically, their white counterparts or just other races, and it's usually as early as in preschool, and its problems can be quite vast. It's issues like this that eventually lead to the constant abrasive and overall negative narrative that looms onto Black girls as they grow, and provides yet another set of racially motivated hurdles faced, this time one that robs them of their innocence and their youth. Again, an entire video could be dedicated to talking about the security and protecting black girls and women. Again, speaking more so to the male viewers for this matter, and I think it does go hand in hand with the last point that was brought up, although this has many more layers to it. All too often, women are seen having their thoughts, feelings, and actions just dismissed, whether it's in the general casual space or even in the professional ones, such as the workforce. There's usually the situations where you might see someone echo sexist phrases such as, women, they're always just so emotional, or women overthink things, it's really never that big of a deal. When women voice their concerns, regardless of the matter, they can often be seen met with dismissal from others, especially men, whether it's like a male friend or a partner or even a parental figure, to the point that you really could start to question if you are doing too much, or if you are overreacting, or maybe that you're even the problem yourself. It's like, why should I even try and come to vent to you when you ask me what's wrong, just to know that my qualms won't be met with any empathy or emotional intelligence? And sometimes people aren't even looking to fix their issues. Sometimes all they want is just some support and reassurance, and to feel like they're at least being heard. I believe that this also contributes to situations where women are conditioned not to speak up about their wants, needs, and problems, because the rhetoric is then formed that she's overreacting or she's asking for too much. It's even part of the reason why some women may not feel very comfortable speaking their mind or expressing their standards, in fear that they, in fact, are asking for too much. There really needs to be a serious conversation about this as well, and refine the way that men communicate with women when it comes to this. And just this constant priming of dismissing women and their thoughts or emotions starts to really work from a really early age and can stick with them for a really long time. And again, it doesn't help that women can often also be dismissed even at the workforce, whether it's during a meeting to express an idea, or during some sort of altercation where they're expressing potentially abusive matters. And in plenty of these situations, there will always be a bunch of men that will try their very best to humble a lady and attempt to put her in her place, all because they think that she's overreacting or she's asking for or doing too much. Especially on those alpha male podcasts. As an example, just as a quick example of this, these are very well seen when women try to voice their standards for partners in regards to physical appearance, occupation, finances, etc. Even when women ask for basic and decent respect and or protection, they're still met with their feelings or words being invalidated. Dog, please do not go on. Don't let Twitter catch women saying that they want a financially stable man that protects them. They will hound you. Oh my god, it's ridiculous. And men post their standards all the time online, but God forbid a woman ask for someone who does more than the bar. Watch the haters come out of hiding. Oh, God. Look, ladies, just remember, there's always someone out there who is patient and cares about your feelings and is willing to go beyond the bar for you. One man's "you're asking for too much" is another man's "that's all." Never be afraid to voice yourself and your standards. So, I know that I mentioned men quite a bit in this video, and yes, while we understand that it's not all men, we often are the cause and perpetuators of the hardships that women may have to deal with in a world dominated by patriarchy, male privilege, and even misogyny. So also, while we at least know that it's not all men, we still have to focus on the men that do cause these problems to occur and have a serious discussion on how to go about educating or calling out the ones that are problematic in our circle, just so we can do what we can to make women feel safe and heard. These women don't even have to be your friends, your mother, daughter, cousins, or nieces. You can extend and display this help to anyone, because it doesn't have to be personal before it's a problem. I've also been starting to think that a lot of men do have this issue of kind of seeing the world as very black and white or one-dimensional, to where they don't really consider other possible outcomes or factors, and accompany phrases like, "Well, sorry, but that's just how the world works, that's just how things are." Whereas women will usually think a bit more outside the box with some situations and say, well, no, that's not how things are. Society just implements this in our lives, and people just kind of go along with it, and that both can and needs to change. I mean, this happens like all the time with men who try to justify actions like slut shaming or victim blaming especially. And I mean, if you are a man or a guy watching this video, maybe this helps to kind of do a little bit of self-reflection and makes you kind of consider your interactions with the women that you know, and even the ones that are strangers to you, and kind of do whatever you can to make sure that they do feel safe, comfortable, and heard in your presence. There's also some of that male privilege that can also be extended to situations where we can help stand up for women where their voices aren't heard as loud, whether it's coming to speaking with like lawmakers about implemented rules on women and their bodies, or standing along with them in various rallies and a lot more. Or even just calling out people like abusers and such that they come to you in privacy or secrecy about. And along with this, we can also try to have those conversations in male spaces that are necessary to changing the narratives currently pushed on women that encourage these previously stated points. And I know I spoke a bit on like male privilege and how the existence of that contributes to men kind of being ignorant of some of these hardships that women may have to face in society. But I think I can already see someone going like, just so what? Like, just because I'm a man means I don't have to go through like any troubles on my own? Like, I don't have any troubles in life? Which the answer to that obviously is no. Because having male privilege, or any privilege for that matter, does not mean that you don't have your own set of hurdles that you have to face in life, but it does mean that there are certain conversations that you don't likely need to consider in life, and that in itself can be a problem. Also, keep in mind that while bringing up all of these topics and such, the goal is not to really bash anyone in particular or any groups of people, but really just to like speak on some of the thoughts in regards to these conversations and how we go about speaking on them. I'm not even going to say that their other side doesn't have their own issues as well, but just for this video, the purpose was more specifically to touch solely on the problems that women more specifically have to face in our society today. So yeah, that's it for the most part. I'm actually extremely surprised that I got here. This video is probably going to be so long in editing. Oh my gosh, looking forward to it. But yeah, I'm just gonna stop the video here. Again, the thing with this topic is just that there's just so much content that can and needs to be discussed, but I know I can't do it all in like one video. So maybe like one day I'll try to go into more detail, or I'll have like a different kind of section about some of these topics. But yeah, in any case, again, these are just like some of the points that I thought were pertinent to shed some light on, because I think there are some people who really don't hear or consider these conversations, and having these discussions can help to eradicate some of the issues that perpetuate these issues or perpetuate these problems. I know that I've seen some of these matters discussed heavily on social media like Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, Instagram, or if it's even been through the women in my own circle who definitely had to like check me on the things that I've said. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect by placing out this video. There's definitely been and likely still will be situations where I'll end up kind of like reflecting on myself and I guess analyzing what I think or what I say or how I even respond or react to certain situations. But like I said before, no matter what's been said or done, all you can really do is like strive to be better. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Later.